Hey guys, so since we won't have time in class to talk about urbanization, I thought I could go through the slides that I put together for you about the growth of cities in the late 19th century, and you could watch it on Edmodo. So this first slide shows you how quickly cities were growing and the scale of city growth. If you take a look at the chart at the bottom, some of those cities have gigantic growth between 1870 and 1900. Just in that 30-year period, look at Chicago and Los Angeles, where their percent increase on the far right. Over here on the far right, you can see like Los Angeles is growing over 1,000%. Seattle grows over 21,000%. Now, Seattle continues to be one of the smaller cities in 1900, but these cities are growing in huge rates. And if you look at the location of those cities that are growing the largest, we see that they're in the Midwest, which is industrializing, so people are going there for jobs. And we also see cities in the West, so people are moving out into the West for mining, and then once they've hit it big, or most of them not hit it big, they've got to stay there, so they're settling together. The picture up on the left, that shows you Mulberry Street, and that's on New York City's Lower East Side. It's from around 1900, but you can see how many people are living on that street there. And New York was a city, the population densities in these cities, especially in New York, are among the highest population densities in the world in this time period. And Mulberry Street was part of Little Italy, where immigrants from Italy are settling together in the cities, which in different cities. You'll see this on a map later too. So cities are growing because of migration from people, whether they're coming from rural areas into these urban areas. So people in America are moving. Immigrants are coming in too, so people are coming from other areas into the city. But cities are not just growing in terms of population size. They're also growing in terms of square miles, so they're extending their borders and incorporating more land and more people. Birth rates are actually not increasing in huge amounts at this time, and they're pretty stable at this point. There's actually an increased use of birth control around 1900. So that's not how cities are growing. They're growing because people are moving and they're extending their borders. And people are moving into these cities because of the industrialization that's going on. So urbanization and industrialization go hand in hand. They're not the same thing. Urbanization is the growth of cities. And by 1920, we become an urban nation, which means that for the first time in American history, 50% of Americans are living in cities. Industrialization, though, is that process of shifting from being an agricultural economy to a manufacturing one. As cities grow, we see skyscrapers being built. And this shows us that industrialization was happening at the same time, because these skyscrapers are being made out of steel. The first skyscraper was in Chicago. It was built by Louis Sullivan in 1885. And cities are growing from pretty small, compact areas that you could walk through to get around to these huge metropolises that require you to commute in vehicles like the electric trolley. We see department stores being created around 1900, like Marshall Field's in Chicago. And so cities are growing, and there you can see the Brooklyn Bridge in that bottom picture. The Brooklyn Bridge was built in 1883, and to prove that it was safe to walk across, a circus took elephants across it because people were afraid, but it was one of these huge successes in engineering. Cities are not nice places around 1900. You probably would not have wanted to live in one of these cities at the time, and you can see that in these pictures here, which show you some of the problems of the urban areas. So in that top left corner, you can see a gigantic pile of garbage. You've got a huge pile of garbage, and it shows us that there's really poor sanitation. Because so many people are moving to the cities, there is a lot of trash. Farmers were always reusing everything, or they gave their trash to animals, but cities don't have that opportunity. Things are cheap and easy to buy, so you can just throw things away if you don't like them anymore. So there's a lot of trash generated. And that goes along with impure water. Water was not safe to drink in this time period. So that leads to, over on the upper right, lots of diseases. So because the water isn't clean, people are living close together. They're not bathing, like that was not, people didn't bathe on a daily basis. They're using outhouses. Disease spreads a whole lot, and you can see that in that cartoon in the upper right corner, the tainted meat and fish, the stale vegetables, and all of these skeletons giving these horrible things to kids who are going to get sick and spread disease even more. The bottom right corner shows some of the first police officers. These are the San Antonio police from around 1900, but police departments were new, and they're created in the late 19th, early 20th centuries by city governments, by political machines, to deal with crime, because there were high crime rates in this time period. And then you can also see on the far right, fire is a problem. This is the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. And as a result of that fire, construction changes. Cities had been built out of wood. And the buildings are so close together that if one catches fire, everything catches fire. And the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 started really simply, and it was easy to start fires at the time because that's what you used for heat and for fuel. And once that fire happens, it spurs people to start changing the way downtowns were built. And so brick is going to be used more often in new construction after 1871, and steel. And that's when we really start to see urban growth. So these are some of the problems in the cities. Not a problem finding work in the city, because we know industrialization is happening. And so many people are coming into the cities for those factory jobs. But because all of those people are coming into the cities, we're going to see crowded housing. And these are some images for you of tenements, Tenements, from around 1900. Housing was really crowded. That upper left-hand corner, you can see that this is an outhouse. This outhouse happens to be on the roof, and so waste would just be thrown over the side and contribute to that poor sanitation issue. You can see here this is an alleyway between tenements, between some tenement buildings, but that fire escape in that image is built out of wood, and so if something catches fire there, there's going to be a problem. Families were often living with people that weren't related to them in a really crowded room. Like, it could be a single room that was their tenement, so that they were sleeping and eating and living all in a single room. And if they had more than one room, they would often rent that out to people that they didn't know because they needed the money to pay the rent. Before 1901, tenements were only required to have one window per apartment or a tiny air shaft for ventilation. These are really dark and dank places to live. So they weren't nice places that people wanted to live in. If you need a definition for a tenement, you can just think of a tenement as a run-down apartment building. And this is where many immigrants would settle. Toilet facilities were communal. You shared it. You didn't have a private bathroom for your little apartment. So you either went in the hall or in an outhouse between the tenements or on the roof. But after 1901, tenement life is going to get a little bit better because they're going to change the law. In the diagram here, you can see what's called a dumbbell tenement. And the dumbbell tenement was the result of a contest in 1879. The contest was to design a tenement where every room would have a window. And this was the design that won. So you can see there's an interior dentation here between the buildings, that air shaft that connects the buildings together, and it makes the buildings have a dumbbell shape. but that air shaft allows for better ventilation and more light into a whole variety of rooms that are in the center of the building, which is great, but it's a really narrow air shaft. Did not give very much light to those interior rooms. Mainly it serves as a dumping ground for garbage. And only one room in each of the apartments was really directly exposed to sunlight and open air. We start to see real changes. We begin to see real changes to tenements after 1901. In New York, they pass a law for new tenements that had to be built around open courtyards to let in light and air, and you had to have one bathroom for each apartment. The problem with that is that housing is expensive. So rents get raised on the old housing because there's this competition between the old housing and the new. The immigrants the people we're seeing in these pictures throughout this are most likely immigrants. And they're settling in these urban areas, mostly urban areas, and they're settling with people from their own culture. We see immigrant neighborhoods developing, and you can see that in this map here. You can see the various different ethnic groups. In
Nyla Johnson to the main office, please.
Chicago.
Nyla Johnson to the main
This is
office.
in Chicago, over different periods of time from 1850 to 1870 and 1890. So by 1900 you have this trend in American cities and urban centers where the city is split into districts. Like the people are living with people based on their shared ethnicity, but also based on shared economic level. And we can see that here in these images. The upper image is a Chinatown. This is in New York City, Chinatown. And then over on the right, we can see Hester Street, which was in the Jewish section of New York. So these pictures are from New York City, but all cities were following this pattern around 1900, late 19th, early 20th centuries. We also see, like I said, people are living with others based on ethnicity, but also based on economic status, a shared economic status. Some people with money want to escape those urban problems that we saw in that earlier slide. They also want to escape the influence of immigrants. So wealthy city dwellers are going to start fleeing to the suburbs. This had started even before the Civil War. Like the creation of railroads had started that a little bit. And then we get trolleys around 1900. That's going to continue with that. Electric trolleys will make suburbs grow more, and then cars are really what's going to fuel that. So suburbs are slowly growing. It's not going to be until the 1950s where we see huge growth of suburbs, but you should be aware that people are moving out of urban areas and living in places like the picture here on the bottom left. And you can see the growth of the cities over time and people moving out. This is, again, Chicago, but you can see how the city is growing over time. And that's partly due to elevated lines and streetcar lines that let wealthy people live away from their jobs, but commute in. Political machines are going to help deal with those economic, with all of the various problems of the cities. You can see Boss Tweed down here. Here's a party boss giving out, in this picture, all of the benefits of political machines. Political machines, party bosses were criticized a lot, but they were really necessary in these new urban environments because they served immigrants' needs. They could serve the immigrants' needs much better than state or local government could. I mean, the machine is going to become the government once it's elected, but these machines, because of their organization and their use of patronage, are able to help people a lot. Many bosses, like William Marcy Tweed from Tammany Hall, were first or second generation immigrants. They had been raised in poverty. They didn't have much education, so they knew the types of problems that immigrants faced. And sometimes they could even speak to immigrants in their own language. So political machines are going to help provide solutions to problems that immigrants faced and problems that cities faced. They would help immigrants with naturalization, the naturalization process, because obviously they want the immigrants to be able to vote for them. Tammany Hall sent workers to Ellis Island to meet new immigrants as soon as they came off the boat. They help immigrants find homes. They help immigrants find jobs. And so it makes sense that immigrants would support these political machines because they had been helped by them. Not everyone is going to use immigrants the way political machines did for their advantage. We're going to start to see people like Jane Addams and other women like Florence Kelley who will create what's called settlement houses within the cities. And they're called settlement houses because these college-educated women, who are some of the earliest college-educated women, are going to go and settle within the cities. They're going to settle within the immigrant neighborhoods and live there to provide services to immigrants, to try to relieve the poverty of immigrants and other city residents. So basically, these settlement houses, like Hull House, this is Hull House in Chicago in the bottom pictures, these settlement houses would provide, you could think of them as community centers in these slum neighborhoods that immigrants lived in. They would provide assistance and friendship to the local residents. They would provide child care. They would provide instruction in English, cultural activities to celebrate the local immigrant communities. And they would lobby the government for social reforms. They would send nurses into the homes of the sick. These weren't religious places. This was not about assimilating people into Christianity. This was about providing community services to people, especially kids. And you can see that in the top picture here. This is, I believe, in New York. I don't think that this is Hull House. I think that this is a settlement house in New York where you can see there's a bunch of kids. And Hull Houses did try, or Hull Houses or settlement houses, they did want to assimilate immigrants. I mean, they wanted to teach them English. They wanted to teach people how to take care of their kids. And they did want immigrants to start fitting into being an American. But remember, it's easiest to target kids when we're trying to change people's behavior. And so settlement houses, in trying to assimilate immigrants, often worked with immigrants' children. So that is a quick summary for you of urbanization stuff. I hope that it helped, and I wish we would have had time in class to work on it.